Welcome to this introduction to ChronosHub. We'll give you an overview on a few slides first, and then take you to a live demo. ChronosHub is the name both on the company based in Copenhagen and the platform, which is a leading open access management platform transforming academic publishing. We work with a lot of authors around the world, dealing with all types of open access, whether that is to check for funding compliance, monitoring open access agreements, or paying for APCs and automating repository deposits. We work with all types of stakeholders in the research ecosystem. So here we see a few selected institutions, funders, and publishers that we work with and try to jointly address the different challenges that we have of navigating open access. The solution serves to automate as much as possible along the complete author journey. So in ChronosHub, authors can get guidance to select a journal. We facilitate submissions into the publisher's peer review systems. And then upon acceptance, we automate license management, open access processing, which sometimes includes approvals of various types, or APC billing and collection. We also structure the information in such a way that we enable reporting on all different aspects, whether that's payments or specific open access agreements. And with the information, both on full text and article metadata, we also automate repository deposits and can put all that data directly into repositories like DSpace or CRIS-systems like Converis or Pure. For a live demo, you can also go to our YouTube channel, where in this example, we'll start with the journal finder. So the journal finder can be both public or accessible only once the user has logged in. In this example, we see a public journal finder for the University of Lausanne, where you can select a funder, but in this case, we see that each journal is matched simply with the university's own policy, and we can see if a journal is flagged as compliant or not. And we can also make transparent whether we as an author have to pay for the APC for a given journal or not. And here we see that based on UNIL's policy, this is a journal that matches their requirements, and UNIL will pay from their central APC fund. The journal finder can also be filtered in various ways. You can filter it on subject areas to find articles in your own subject domains. You can filter it so you can see only journals indexed, for example, in Scopus or DOAJ, that you also see flagged over here. And in this case, we'll filter on Wiley as a publisher to illustrate that you can also make institutional agreements with publishers transparent in the journal finder. For the first journal, we see that that is a gold journal, so not covered by an agreement, but UNIL will pay for us. The second example here is included in an agreement, and we see that the APCs will be covered by that agreement between the University of Lausanne and the publisher, so Wiley in this case. We can also find journals in here that are hybrid, and that are not covered by an agreement. So in this case, we'll have to pay for any APCs through our grant funding or any other funds that we may have available. So the journal finder really helps to make that transparent, who will pay for this, and is it compliant with my institution and or funder. And the next step of the journey can either take the author directly to the journal's login page to do a submission, or it can take the author into ChronosHub to make the submission through the system instead. That has the advantage that a part of the submission form can be pre-populated, and in particular, upon acceptance, we can automate the process completely for the author. So in order to see an example of that, we'll switch to another view. So this is the login page, and exactly as the public journal finder, we always customize the design with the organization's own logo, image, and colors. And then when we log in, we'll see that we are logged in as Jane Doe, belong to the University of Zurich in this case. And when you are logged in here, we can see, first of all, an introduction to the system and also what different services we can benefit from, whether that is to go to the journal finder and check our favorite journals or make a submission that we'll illustrate soon. Or if it's later in the journey where we have an invoice from the publisher and we want to upload it in the system or send it simply per email, as you can see here. You also have an overview of your articles in different steps of the process, from draft through submitted to accepted, published, or rejected or not accepted articles. Authors can also rest assured that rejected articles are not seen by anyone else than themselves. And in addition, they can also delete any such articles from their profile if they want to. And just to illustrate a little bit further, when there are any actions to take, then we can also trigger email notifications to the author, or we can illustrate that or highlight that directly on the dashboard. So here we see an example for Emerald, but the functionality is also available for institutions. And we see that there is one accepted article here, marked with a red dot and a red line here, an exclamation mark, where we see that some action is required. That action is to select the publishing option. And we can also see that under our notifications up here. So if we go back to this environment and start our journey in the Journal Finder, we'll again see the about 46,000 journals that are indexed. In this case, compliance means compliant with the Swiss National Science Foundation's publishing policy. And here we rather see that it is the SNSF that will pay for the APC in some cases, and in other cases it will state that it will not pay for it. We can do similar but not identical filtering. The filters are customizable as well per organization. The Journal Finder can of course also be searched through. So we index the titles, keywords, and the description fields. And in this case, searching for PLOS gives us 57 different matches. And let's say that we decided to submit to PLOS 1. Then we can click the submit button here. The first question is if we want to reuse an existing article or if we want to submit it as a new article. And here we will select new manuscript submission. But you see that there is also a possibility to make submissions or enter data into ChronosHub also in later stages of the process. For example, if you got an article accepted by a publisher and you want to just upload an invoice. But we'll see that there is an easier path to get your invoice registered than going through the system this way. So these can be deactivated if you want to. In that case, you're taken to the submission form directly. If the journal is integrated, you'll find a submission form that looks similar to this. It's a little bit different from journal title to journal title, but they are not very long. They look more or less like this, but still includes all the necessary information that we need to automate the process upon acceptance. If the journal title is not integrated, you will only fill in essentially the article's title. And then we take the author to the journal submission page. But that's sufficient for us to get it on the radar. It's easier for us to pick it up upon acceptance automatically. But it's even better, of course, when the journal title is integrated, like you can see here, because then the author does not have to fill in this case, all the grant details with grant number and funder details with a name and some unique identifiers potentially. The article title we paste in, authors we can search for, or we can just keep it as this if we are the only author, of course, so we are automatically associated with the article. So we don't have to type in first name, last name, email address, ORCID ID, organizational affiliation, and the like. It's just important that we validate, if we have several authors, that the right one is the corresponding author, as a lot of the business logic is based upon the corresponding author. But typically you just select from lists as you do here. So it takes less than 30 seconds usually to do a complete submission through ChronosHub. So that's of course very fast, and it gets the author going with their submission, and the publisher is, after the submission in ChronosHub, contacting the author if there is any information that they need to complete in the publisher's submission system. So the journey for an author may end here, and everything upon acceptance is taken care of by ChronosHub. But in some cases, when it's about APCs, not all publishers send their invoices necessarily directly to ChronosHub. Some send the invoices also directly to the authors. So we need to have a solution in place that can cater for that so that we can unburden the researchers in a systematic way across the board. So what we have done to facilitate for authors that do receive invoices directly is that they can simply forward their invoice by email to ChronosHub, and then ChronosHub automatically scans the invoice and only asks the author to complete any information that is required for funding eligibility checks and that are not found or identified on the invoice. So if we take an example here, we received an invoice from the Royal Society. The invoice is, in this case, an attached PDF document. Sometimes the invoice details are directly in the email. You just click forward, and then you send this email to the organization name at chronoshub.io. So the example we looked at before would be snsf@chronoshub.io. When you click send, ChronosHub does a number of validations and checks. And if all is fine and we will pay the invoice, the author just receives a confirmation back. But if something is missing, we're dynamically building a form where we ask the author to complete it. In this case, the email looks like this. Thank you for forwarding your invoice. We need to know a bit more. Fill out the form, we click the button, and we see the information that the invoice scanning could identify. And we're simply asked to complete the information that we could not identify. In this case, the author does also not need to log into the system. They're automatically authenticated based on their email address. And the grants that they see in their list here are the grants that they have in their researcher profile in ChronosHub. So this is a typical example. Associate the article with a given grant. Article type is not that common, but just serves as an illustration in this example. So we click submit, and that's it. As an author, we don't need to do more than that. What happens with the invoice is that it appears then in an approval dashboard. So every organization has access to an approval dashboard where all these invoices, whether they come directly from a publisher or indirectly from the author, appear under pending approval. In this list, ChronosHub is automatically checking all the different funding eligibility criteria that you have as an organization. And you see an overview here, 5 out of 7 are fine. So there are 2 out of these 7 that are not fine, but maybe you can still accept it. So there are pending approvals here. All the information that we see here was automatically then ingested. With the author details, we see who the corresponding author is. And these requirements and funding eligibility criteria are configured specifically to each institution's own requirements. So this may include completely different criteria. Some have caps, some accept not only gold, but also hybrid articles. Some do not care about the license. Others care more that there is a confirmation that the authors are still at the institution and so forth. Here you also have a log where any comments along the workflow are included, so you can see those. And then you have an overview of the APCs and other publishing fees. And you have access to the direct invoice here as well. So the only thing you're asked to do is to give an approval or reject it, or you can also conditionally approve it. And depending on your action here, this article will be taken forward to a payment if it's approved. If it's rejected, then the author is informed that you will not pay for it. Conditionally approved means that the author may be informed that he or she may need to take some kind of action, maybe sign another license agreement in order for you to approve it. And then you will get it back under pending approval once the author has addressed that issue. So that's how it works with payment approvals, but it's very similar also for approving articles part of open access agreements. All the articles, once paid, appear then under accounts. So if you go to accounts, you will be able to see different accounts that you have here. You can see what the balance is based on how much that was paid. If you want to, you can then go in and see the individual transactions in more detail. So here you see a list of those, And if you click on any of those transactions, you will see all the different invoice details that were populated automatically based on scanning the invoice. And that may include a lot of different line items, not only the APCs, of course, but there may be additional page charges and the like. So as you see here, it is possible to also make updates, corrections manually, but we try at least to auto-populate it as much as possible based on the invoice scanning. So all the data that you have in your profile on ChronosHub is all your data, and you can use it for all kinds of reports. One type of report is the so-called article report, which is essentially enabling you to quickly get any of the data out into Excel. That can include any number of article metadata fields, and you can sort that list in here in various ways, for example, based on grants or applicants, institution, publishers, and the different dates and amounts and compliance checks and the like. It also includes direct links to the invoices where there is an invoice. And then you click here if you want to download it into Excel. And in Excel, you can, of course, use the data in all kinds of ways.
Another type of report is Insights Advanced. This report enables you to filter on various things. So you can, for example, change the time period, look at the data for this year as an example, or filter on publisher, journal, funder, institution, as you see here, or specifically on institutional agreements, so you can monitor those in more detail. You can also click in this report in any of the blue fields to filter further down. And then you can get an overview of the articles geographically, seen to the co-authors' affiliations and their locations, or a breakdown per publisher or journal, funder, or details seen to licenses or open access types. You also have specific compliance reports and specific reports seen to payments in this example. And a further report is called Voucher Report or Agreement Report. This is an example of the agreement report for a publisher, but for institutions, it works in the same way, but reversed. So instead of seeing the consortia here, you see the different publishers. And for each publisher, you may have an uncapped or a capped agreement seen to a given quota. And you may also have discount agreements, and you'll see a few examples of that further down. That means that you see an overview here of the total number of vouchers or the total quota across all your agreements, how many that you used, how many that have been rejected by your authors, and how many that you have that are remaining. And if you look at this list, you can also sort it in various ways, and then you can drill down into the details. So if we look at this example, we see details per individual consortium member, and then for each institution, you can also drill down into the individual article details, where you can see some that are accepted, others are rejected, and then export that into Excel for the article metadata. And then here you see a few examples of agreements where you have a discount instead. So with that said, thank you very much for listening in, and please get in contact with us for any further discussions and questions.